My name is Madison Clark. I'm 33 years old, a senior account manager at Brightline Creative Agency in Austin, Texas, and, until this week, the woman who hadn't taken a real vacation in over 3 years. If stories about setting boundaries, family drama, and learning to choose yourself resonate with you, please subscribe, like, and share. Your support helps me keep telling these stories exactly as they happened. I sat at my desk in the corner office, the late afternoon sun spilling through the blinds in slats of gold, my inbox stacked with urgent requests that had somehow been marked high priority for months. My promotion had been official for 30 days, but my body still carried the tight shoulders and shallow breathing of someone braced for the next crisis. Today, though, was different. My cursor hovered over the send button on an email addressed to my boss. Vacation request, 10 days. My finger tapped the mouse, and the email shot off into cyberspace. I exhaled so hard it felt like I was letting go of the past 3 years in one breath. Finally giving yourself a break? Jenna from HR passed by my open door with a cup of coffee, raising an eyebrow. 10 whole days, I grinned, leaning back in my chair. Somewhere warm, with sand. No meetings, no last-minute client pitches, just me and an umbrella drink. Her laugh trailed down the hall, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something loosen inside me. That night, my apartment in downtown Austin felt lighter. I tossed my work heels into the closet, traded them for cozy socks, and opened my laptop. The glow of the screen lit up my small living room as I scrolled through images of turquoise water, palm-fringed beaches, and pastel sunsets. Key West caught my attention almost immediately. The photos looked like they were dipped in honey and salt water, brightly painted houses with wraparound porches, narrow streets shaded by banyan trees, and a horizon that promised nothing but open sea. This, I thought, is what breathing must feel like. I imagined walking barefoot down Duval Street with a cup of Cuban coffee in hand, lingering at quirky little shops, then spending entire afternoons on the sand, the only decision being which novel to read next. My phone buzzed on the couch beside me. I didn't have to check to know who it was. Every Thursday night, like clockwork, Mom sent out her group text. "Sunday dinner at 5 don't be late." I smiled despite myself. No matter how hectic life got, the Clarks' Sunday dinners were sacred. Mom's roast chicken, Dad's corny jokes, the sound of my nieces and nephews running through the hall. It was chaos, but the kind I'd grown up in. Still, lately, that chaos had a way of pulling me under. I set the phone face down and clicked on a flight listing. Austin to Miami, a short hop to Key West after that. The prices weren't cheap, but for 10 days of peace, they were worth every penny. I thought back to the last vacation I'd taken. 4 years ago, a cabin trip in Colorado with the family. It had started with promises of hiking and campfires, but ended with me trapped indoors, wrangling Ethan's 3 kids while everyone else went rafting. I hadn't minded helping, at first, but somewhere along the way, helping became expected, and I stopped having any say in the matter. Not this time. I bookmarked the flights, heart rate steady but determined. If I booked tonight, there'd be no turning back. From the kitchen, the kettle began to whistle. I poured myself a mug of chamomile tea, the steam curling into my face as I stared out at the lights of the city. Austin had a way of holding its warmth into the night, the air still humming with music from bars and street performers. Somewhere in that noise was the life I'd built on my own, my friends, my work, my little apartment where everything stayed exactly where I left it. The idea of being far away from all the noise, work noise, family noise, felt almost unreal. I opened the flight page again, fingers poised. 10 days in Key West. 10 days without anyone needing something from me. Click. Booked. The confirmation email landed in my inbox with a satisfying ping. My trip was set for 3 weeks from today. I leaned back into the couch, tea warm in my hands, already picturing the first morning there. Sunlight spilling over the ocean, my phone switched to airplane mode, and nothing on my calendar but the tides. I didn't know it yet, but that single click would set in motion a chain of events I could never have imagined. And it all started with choosing myself, for the first time in a very long time. 3 days after I booked my trip to Key West, Sunday rolled around like it always did. The drive from Austin to my parents' place in San Antonio was a straight shot down I-35, but I'd learned to leave early. If you showed up late, Mom had a way of letting the mashed potatoes get cold before passing them to you, her not-so-subtle version of punishment. As I pulled into their familiar driveway, the evening sun washed the white brick house in gold. Ethan's black SUV was already there, a basketball rolling lazily behind it, probably from his oldest. Lauren's minivan was parked half on the curb, glitter stickers covering the back window like some kind of moving scrapbook. The second I stepped out of my car, I could hear the noise inside. High-pitched squeals, overlapping adult voices, the scrape of a chair across the tile floor. The front door swung open before I even knocked. "There she is!" Mom, Evelyn Clark, was in an apron, a wooden spoon in one hand and a grin on her face. She pulled me into a hug that smelled like rosemary and garlic. "We were just talking about summer plans." I slipped off my jacket, glancing toward the living room. Ethan was trying to coax his youngest, Noah, down from the arm of the couch. Megan sat cross-legged on the floor, piecing together a puzzle with Emma, while Ethan's other two kids chased each other in circles. In the kitchen, Dad was bent over the oven, checking on something that smelled suspiciously like his signature cornbread. "Madison, can you grab Mia before she knocks over the lamp?" Lauren called from the hallway, one hand holding a diaper bag, the other reaching for her toddler, who had decided the coffee table was a stage. I caught the little girl mid-twirl and swung her onto my hip. "Hey, superstar, let's save the furniture for another day." Dinner came together in the usual controlled chaos. Booster seats locked in, sippy cups filled, adults negotiating who would sit where so the youngest ones wouldn't start a food fight before grace was even said. Somewhere between Dad passing the roast chicken and Mom topping off wine glasses, I decided to share my news. "So, I finally put in for vacation time," I said, trying to sound casual as I spooned mashed potatoes onto my plate. 10 days. I'm leaving in 3 weeks. Key West." For a beat, the room went oddly quiet. Then, like a spark catching, conversation erupted. Dad's eyes lit up. "What timing? We've been talking about a family trip this summer." Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the table. "We're planning San Diego. Take the kids to the zoo, Legoland, maybe SeaWorld. You should come with us." Lauren clapped her hands once, the way she does when she's decided something for everyone. "Yes, Madison, it'd be perfect. We could all go together." I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. This wasn't the picture I'd painted for myself, sipping cafecitos on a quiet porch, walking the beach at sunrise. In my mind, San Diego with family looked like me corralling 5 kids in a hotel room while everyone else took turns that never actually happened. "I don't know," I hedged. I was kind of looking forward to some alone time. "Alone time?" Lauren wrinkled her nose like I'd suggested spending my vacation in a tax office. "That's depressing. Vacations are meant to be shared." I met her gaze, steady. "Remember the Colorado trip? 4 years ago? I spent the entire week indoors with your kids while you went rafting." "That was different," Megan chimed in quickly. "They were younger then." "They're still kids," I said, not unkindly, but firm. Mom reached across the table and patted my hand. "We just worry about you being alone so much, sweetheart. It's not healthy." "I'm not alone all the time. I have friends, colleagues," I countered. "Family is different," Dad cut in, his tone leaving little room for argument. "Besides, when was the last time we all went somewhere together?" I didn't look away. 4 years ago, and I was the full-time babysitter. Ethan waved a hand dismissively. "You're exaggerating. We all pitched in." I raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "Because I distinctly remember being stuck in that cabin while you and Megan went ziplining." "We promise it won't be like that this time," Lauren said brightly. "We'll take turns. You won't have to watch them at all if you don't want to." The table seemed to lean toward me, everyone wearing the same hopeful expression. Even the kids perked up at the idea of Aunt Maddie on a trip. "We've already looked at hotels," Mom added quickly. "A beautiful resort on the bay, pools, activities, everything. We booked flights for 3 weeks from Friday. You should get on the same one." I felt the weight of their expectation pressing in from all sides. Part of me wanted to stand my ground, but another part, tired of being the one who always said no, was tempted to just nod. Maybe, I thought, maybe they meant it this time. "Okay," I heard myself say as we started clearing plates. "I'll book my ticket when I get home tonight." The cheer that went up around the table made me smile, even as something inside me whispered, "Careful. You've heard this promise before." The week after that Sunday dinner, I noticed something unusual. Normally, by Monday afternoon, one of my siblings would text something like, "Emergency at work. Can you watch the kids for a few hours?" A few hours always morphed into an entire evening. Sometimes they wouldn't even come in to say hello when they picked the kids up, just honk the horn from the driveway like I was some after-hours daycare. But this week, silence. At first, I didn't think much of it. My workload at Brightline was a storm of client campaigns and end-of-quarter reports, so maybe I just wasn't noticing the usual pings. But by Thursday night, as I closed my laptop at exactly 6 o'clock, a rare victory, I realized my phone hadn't lit up once with a babysitting request. No, "Hey Maddie, could you pick up Emma from soccer?" No, "We're running late. Could you give the kids dinner?" It was strange. Friday evening, I called Mom while folding laundry. "Is everything okay over there? Haven't heard much from anyone this week." "We're fine," she said, her tone light but clipped. "Just busy getting things together for San Diego. The kids are excited. Oh, and we found a new swimsuit for Noah. Little sharks on it. Adorable." "That's cute," I said. But there was a part of me waiting for the inevitable ask. It never came. The next week was more of the same. No surprise drop-offs, no last-minute phone calls. Even Lauren, who used to stop by just to visit, and somehow leave her toddler with me for an hour, kept her distance. If anything, they seemed polite. At the agency, I mentioned it to Jenna while we were grabbing coffee. "Either my family has finally learned boundaries," I joked, "or they're planning something." Jenna laughed, but gave me a look over the rim of her mug. "You've known them your whole life. Which one do you think it is?" Her question sat in the back of my mind for days. One Tuesday evening, I was in my kitchen slicing strawberries for a salad when my phone lit up. Lauren Davis, Messenger. For half a second, I thought, here it is. But the preview text made me pause. "Mark? No. Ethan." She must have meant Ethan, her brother, my brother. The preview read, "Ethan. Madison doesn't suspect anything. She actually believes us about—" I didn't open it. My thumb hovered over the screen, my pulse quickening. Before I could decide, the notification disappeared. This message was deleted. I stood there, the knife suspended above the cutting board, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly loud in the silence. It could have been about anything, I told myself. But my gut had already filled in the blanks, and the explanation wasn't flattering. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and set the phone down without unlocking it. I didn't want to chase shadows, or worse, find proof that I was walking into the same trap I'd fallen into before. Still, the timing was too perfect to ignore. Over the next few days, my thoughts kept circling back. The absence of requests, the overly cheerful dinner conversation, the "we promise it won't be like last time" assurances. It all felt like a stage being set. By the time I zipped my suitcase 2 weeks before departure, my excitement for Key West had dulled to a cautious watchfulness. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe this really was the first time in years my family intended to give me the same freedom they took for themselves. But deep down, a small, steady voice whispered, "They haven't changed. They're just playing the long game." I pushed the thought aside, closed my suitcase, and tucked my flight itinerary into the front pocket of my carry-on. 3 weeks from now, I'd find out which it was. It happened on a Thursday night, just under 2 weeks before the trip. I'd just gotten home from work, still in my blazer, hair twisted into a loose knot from the Austin humidity. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the faint sound of traffic 3 floors below. I set my bag on the kitchen counter, kicked off my heels, and started a pot of water for pasta. My phone buzzed on the counter. "Lauren Davis, Messenger. Not unusual. Lauren sent memes, school pictures of the kids, or group dinner updates, but tonight, the preview text froze me mid-stir of the sauce. Ethan? Madison doesn't suspect anything. She actually believes us about not having to watch the kids. My stomach dropped. I tapped the screen before my brain caught up, but the chat bubble was gone. In its place, this message was deleted. The spoon in my hand clinked against the pot, a sharp, hollow sound. I stood there for a moment, staring at the phone like it might confess something if I waited long enough. My first thought was to call her, ask outright what she meant, but the wording had been so matter-of-fact, so confident, it told me everything I needed to know. The quiet I'd noticed the past 2 weeks, the careful politeness, the absence of babysitting requests, it hadn't been respect for my time, it had been strategy. A heat rose in my chest, not the sharp sting of shock, but the deep, slow burn of recognition. They hadn't changed. They were just better at hiding the setup. My pasta was boiling over, the hiss of starchy water hitting the burner pulling me back. I turned off the heat, pushed the pot aside, and grabbed my laptop. If they thought I was going to San Diego to be their unpaid nanny, they were about to get the surprise of their lives. I opened my flight reservation. 1 click. Cancel trip. The airline offered a partial refund. I took it without hesitation. Next tab. Hotel booking. Cancelled. Then, without pausing, I searched. Austin to Key West. The prices had jumped since I first checked, but the sight of that turquoise water and white sand was like oxygen in my lungs. I booked the flight, then found a boutique hotel tucked a block from the beach. Every photo screamed quiet mornings, and no one knocking on my door with a toddler in tow. When the confirmation email landed in my inbox, I leaned back, a small, satisfied smile spreading across my face. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a group text from Mom. "Don't forget to pack sunscreen for San Diego. The kids can't wait to play with Aunt Maddie on the beach." I typed back a quick thumbs-up emoji, my fingers steady even as my pulse picked up. If they could play games, so could I. The rest of the evening, I went about my normal routine, watered my plants, folded laundry, queued up a show on Netflix, but underneath it all was a current of cold resolve. They had spent years treating my time as less valuable because I didn't have children of my own. Years of helping out that turned into unpaid, unasked-for labor. And now, they'd wrapped that same expectation in a ribbon of false promises, thinking I wouldn't notice. They were wrong. I closed my laptop, the hum of the fridge filling the silence. Tomorrow, I'd keep smiling in our family group chats, play along with the San Diego planning, and let them think they'd pulled it off. In reality, my suitcase would be packed for something entirely different. 10 days in Key West with no responsibilities but my own. It wasn't revenge. Not exactly. It was reclaiming something they'd quietly taken from me year after year, and when the time came, they'd learn that I wasn't the same Madison they'd counted on before. By the next Sunday dinner, my plan was already in motion. Key West was booked. My flights, my room, even a snorkeling excursion, all set. All I had to do now was act like I was headed straight for San Diego with the rest of them. The familiar scent of Mom's rosemary roast drifted out the front door when I knocked. She opened it with her usual warm smile, flour dusting her sleeves. "There's our world traveler," she teased, pulling me into a hug. "All packed for California?" "Almost," I said lightly, stepping into the hallway. "Still have a couple things to pick up. Sunscreen, sandals. You know the drill." Ethan was in the living room, pretending to clean chocolate ice cream off Noah's face while trying not to grin. Megan sat on the couch, scrolling on her phone, but her eyes flicked up to meet mine for a fraction too long before darting away. The air in the house had that same too sweet quality it had the past few weeks, like a pie with too much sugar, fine at first bite, but cloying if you paid attention. Lauren breezed in from the kitchen, balancing a tray of lemonade. "Maddie, the kids can't wait to build sandcastles with you. Mia's been talking about it all week." I forced a smile, crouching to hug my niece. "We'll see what we can make happen," I said, my voice warm but carefully non-committal. Dinner unfolded in its usual noisy rhythm, passing dishes, corralling wandering toddlers, and trading stories over clinking silverware. Between bites of mashed potatoes, Mom leaned over. "Don't forget to print your boarding pass early. You know how lines get at the airport." I nodded, taking a sip of water to hide my smirk. "Don't worry, Mom. My boarding pass will be ready, just not for your flight." As the plates were cleared, the conversation turned to the itinerary. Ethan and Ryan argued about whether to hit the zoo or Legoland first. Lauren was already mapping out kid-free evenings, talking about how the resort had a great bar and live music. I kept my voice even when I chimed in. "Sounds like you'll have a blast. Just remember, I'm not chasing anyone after 8 p.m., I said with a playful wink, earning a round of laughter. They thought I was joking. Later in the living room, I sat on the arm of Dad's recliner while he showed me photos of the hotel. "Right on the bay," he said proudly. "You're going to love it." I leaned in, pretending to admire the view, but my mind was already picturing the veranda of my Key West hotel, a cold drink sweating in my hand as the sun dipped into the Gulf. When I finally said my goodbyes, Mom hugged me again at the door. "3 weeks will fly by," she said. "I can't wait." "Me neither," I replied, and for once it wasn't a lie. Back in my car, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Playing along was harder than I expected. Every smile felt like a test, every casual comment like bait, but the satisfaction of knowing what they didn't made it worth it. Over the next 2 weeks, I played the part perfectly, sending texts about travel-sized toiletries, chiming in on the group chat when someone mentioned dinner reservations, even offering to bring extra beach toys for the kids. What I didn't mention was the quiet afternoon I spent at a boutique in East Austin, trying on wide-brimmed hats and sundresses in coral and turquoise, or the way I triple-checked my Key West confirmation emails late at night, the glow of the laptop bathing my living room in secret light. The night before their flight, Mom texted, "Don't forget to set your alarm. We'll see you in San Diego tomorrow afternoon." I typed back a simple, "Can't wait." I could almost hear their voices in my head, relieved, confident, certain they'd pulled me in for another round of family vacation. But tomorrow, when they checked into their Bayfront resort, I'd be boarding a different plane, one that would land me in a place where no one called me Aunt Maddie every 5 minutes. And that thought alone made me sleep better than I had in months. The morning of their departure, my phone lit up before my alarm. "Mom, just checked in at the San Antonio airport. Security line's short. Kids are buzzing with excitement. Can't wait to see you tomorrow, honey." I lay in bed for a moment, staring at the text. They were about to board their flight to San Diego, confident I'd be right behind them. I typed back a single smiley face emoji and set the phone down. In reality, my suitcase was already zipped and leaning against the front door, packed not with sensible sandals for the zoo, but with bright sundresses, wide-brimmed hats, and paperbacks I'd been saving for a trip that belonged entirely to me. By the time I slid into the back seat of my rideshare, the air was already warm, the kind that promised a full Texas summer day. The driver glanced at my luggage. "Headed to the beach?" "Something like that," I said, smiling to myself. Austin Bergstrom was busy but not chaotic. I breezed through security, earbuds in, a playlist of easy acoustic songs carrying me toward my gate. I passed a boarding sign for San Diego and felt a small spark of satisfaction, like watching a train you were never meant to catch pull away from the platform. At my gate, the monitor read, "Flight 237, Key West FL." Just seeing the words made my chest feel lighter. I texted Jenna from HR a quick selfie with the gate sign in the background. "Operation Freedom. Underway." She replied with a string of clapping emojis and a, "Drink something with an umbrella for me." The flight itself felt like a transition between two versions of myself, the one who said yes to every family obligation, and the one who had finally decided her time mattered just as much as anyone else's. When the plane descended over the Keys, I pressed my forehead to the window. The water below was a shifting mosaic of turquoise and jade, sunlight glinting off the waves like scattered coins. My breath caught, not just at the beauty of it, but at the realization that I'd gotten here entirely on my own terms. The moment I stepped out of the airport, warm ocean air wrapped around me, scented with salt and hibiscus. A short taxi ride later, I was standing in the lobby of a boutique hotel painted the color of sea glass. White shutters framed every window, and ceiling fans turned lazily overhead. "Welcome to the Seabreeze Inn," the receptionist said, sliding a brass key across the counter. "First time in Key West?" "First time," I said, my smile this time completely unforced. But not the last. I didn't even unpack. 20 minutes after arriving in my room, I was barefoot on the beach, the sand warm under my feet, the ocean murmuring like a secret only I was meant to hear. For hours, I did nothing but float in that space between sun and sea, feeling each knot of tension loosen. By the time I wandered back to my room, my skin kissed with salt and sun, I realized I hadn't thought about San Diego or babysitting duty once, until I turned my phone back on. It vibrated like it was trying to crawl out of my bag, missed calls, voicemails, and texts flooding in. "Ethan. Maddie, you land yet?" Lauren. "Kids are asking where you are. Thought you'd be here by now." Mom. "We're at the hotel. It's beautiful. Did you miss your flight?" I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolled through them all, then typed one short message into the family group chat. "Having a wonderful time in Key West. Please don't disturb my vacation. See you when I get back." I hit send, turned the phone off, and let the silence settle back around me. Out in the distance, the horizon blushed pink as the sun dropped toward the water. Tomorrow, I'd snorkel. Maybe rent a bike and ride through Old Town. No schedules, no guilt trips, no little voices calling Aunt Maddie every 5 minutes. For the first time in years, my vacation was mine alone, and I intended to savor every single second. By Saturday morning, the salt still clung to my skin from yesterday's swim. The sunlight streaming through the shutters was warm enough to pull me out of bed without an alarm. I made coffee in the little French press the hotel kept in the room, carrying the mug out to the balcony where I could watch the ocean yawn awake. It was a perfect morning, until I turned my phone back on. The screen lit up like a slot machine, 37 missed calls, more than 20 voicemails, and a flood of texts in the family group chat. "Ethan. Where are you?" Lauren. "Your flight landed hours ago. We waited at the airport." Mom. "We're worried sick. Call me now." I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the bitterness roll over my tongue. They'd been expecting me to walk off the plane in San Diego last night, smiling, ready to slip into the role they'd scripted. Instead, I'd been barefoot in the surf, the only thing in my hands a paperback and a glass of white wine. I scrolled further. Lauren. "The kids are disappointed. Mia cried when you didn't come." Ethan. "This isn't funny, Maddie. You're being selfish." Mom. "We planned this for months. How could you do this to us?" The word selfish made me laugh, short and sharp, enough to startle a seagull from the railing. For years, my time had been the family's backup plan. Now, the one time I'd chosen myself, I was suddenly the villain. I typed slowly, deliberately into the group chat. "I'm having a wonderful time in Key West. Please don't disturb my vacation. See you when I get back." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. No reply. I set the phone face down and carried my coffee to the beach. If they wanted answers, they could stew in the silence for a while. It didn't last. Around noon, as I sat under a striped umbrella with my toes buried in the sand, my phone rang again. Mom. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Madison Marie Clark, what on earth do you think you're doing?" Her voice was tight, the kind of sharp she used when we were kids and had just tracked mud through the kitchen. "Good morning to you too," I said, leaning back in the lounge chair. "I'm enjoying my vacation." "In Florida? Without telling us? You ruined our trip. Your brother and sister are furious. The children are upset. Stop!" My voice cut clean through hers. "I know about the plan, Mom." "What plan?" she said quickly, but there was the smallest hitch in her voice. "The one where I'd just happened to end up watching the kids while you all had fun. The one Lauren accidentally texted me about." There was a pause long enough to hear the ocean between us. "You're overreacting," she said finally. We just didn't want to bother you with the details ahead of time. Details? My laugh had no humor in it. You mean the part where I'd spend my first vacation in 3 years as unpaid childcare? That's not a detail. That's the whole picture. You're single, Maddie. You don't understand how hard it is for Ethan and Lauren. No, I said, my voice steel now. What I understand is that my time matters just as much as theirs. I've been working non-stop for years to get where I am, and it is not my responsibility to parent their children. That's not how family works, Mom snapped. Then maybe it's time we redefine family, I said, and ended the call before she could answer. My hands trembled as I slid the phone back into my bag, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally saying what I should have said years ago. The rest of the day, I let the tide pull the tension out of me. I swam until my muscles hummed, wandered through side streets lined with pastel houses, and ended the evening at a dockside cafe with a plate of fresh snapper. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was running from a fight. I'd stood my ground, and the world hadn't ended. Somewhere back in San Diego, they were adjusting to a vacation without their built-in babysitter, and me, and I was watching the sunset over Key West, the horizon a wash of gold and lavender, with absolutely no plans to apologize. By the next morning, the storm I'd stirred up in San Diego had clearly intensified. I was sitting on the balcony of my hotel, the early Key West light turning the water to molten gold, when my phone lit up again. Mom. I stared at the name, debating whether to let it go to voicemail. But a part of me, the part that wanted the air cleared on my terms, hit accept. Her voice was sharp right out of the gate. Madison Marie Clark, you need to explain yourself right now. I didn't answer right away. I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch. Explain what, exactly? Don't play games with me, she snapped. You blindsided your entire family. We're here trying to have a vacation, and your brother and sister are furious. The children are crying. Do you understand what you've done? I leaned back in my chair, watching a pelican skim the surface of the water. I understand perfectly, and I also understand you weren't honest with me. That's ridiculous, she said. Is it? Because Lauren accidentally sent me a message meant for Ethan. It spelled out the plan, how you all agreed I'd end up with the kids while you got to relax. That's not a misunderstanding. That's lying. Her tone shifted from anger to a syrupy kind of patience, the one she used when I was 10 and trying to argue for a later bedtime. You're reading too much into things, Maddie. We just didn't want to overwhelm you with the details ahead of time. Overwhelm me? I laughed, short and humorless. You mean the detail where my first real vacation in 3 years would be spent babysitting 5 kids from sunup to sundown? That's not a detail, Mom. That's the whole trip. You're single, she said firmly, like it was a trump card. You don't understand how exhausting it is for Ethan and Lauren. They deserve a break. So do I said, and my voice was calmer than I felt. I've been working 60-hour weeks to get where I am, and the fact that I don't have kids doesn't mean my time is free for the taking. That's not how family works, she fired back. No, I said evenly, that's not how exploitation should work, and what you did, what you all agreed to, was take advantage of me. Again. There was a pause, and when she spoke again, the edge in her voice was back. You're being dramatic. We were worried sick when you didn't show up in San Diego. I learned from the best, I said quietly. You've all been playing this game for years, deciding how my time will be spent without asking me first. This time I made my own decision. Madison, I'm not doing this right now. My hands were steady on the phone. I'm going to enjoy the rest of my vacation. When I get back, maybe we can talk, if I feel like it. But until then, you need to respect my choice. Don't you dare hang up on me, young lady. I ended the call. The adrenaline hit right after, my pulse thudding in my ears. I set the phone on the table and just sat there for a minute, listening to the gentle rush of waves. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. This was something else, something like release. I'd spent years swallowing my frustration, letting guilt and obligation dictate my choices. One phone call wasn't going to erase all that, but it felt like the first real crack in a wall that had been standing my whole life. Later, I slipped into the water off a quiet stretch of beach, letting the ocean hold me up. No schedules, no interruptions, no little voices calling Aunt Maddie every 5 minutes, just the steady rhythm of the tide and the knowledge that, for once, I hadn't let anyone talk me out of what I wanted. The morning after that phone call with Mom, I woke to the sound of waves instead of my ringtone. The sunlight was already spilling across the bed, warm and unhurried, like the day itself wasn't in a rush for anything. For the first time in years, I didn't start my day checking messages. I made coffee, carried it to the balcony, and let the salty breeze do the talking. My phone stayed on the nightstand, face down, exactly where it belonged. Key West moved at a different rhythm, one my body adjusted to almost immediately. I rented a bike with a wicker basket and spent afternoons pedaling past pastel houses with wraparound porches, their shutters thrown open to let the sea air in. Bougainvillea spilled over white fences in cascades of fuchsia, and strangers smiled at me as if we already knew each other. One day, I booked a snorkeling trip. The boat skimmed over water so clear I could see the sandy bottom 20 feet down. When I slipped into the ocean, schools of yellowtail darted around me, the reef blooming in colors that didn't seem possible outside a painting. Floating there, weightless, I thought, this is what my time should feel like. In the evenings, I'd pick a new spot for dinner, sometimes a lively dockside place where the band played Jimmy Buffett covers, other times a quiet bistro tucked into an alley, candles flickering in the breeze. I'd eat fresh-caught grouper or key lime pie and linger over a glass of wine with no one to hurry me along. The only reminders of San Diego came when I turned my phone on for an hour each night, just long enough to make sure nothing at work was burning down. The family group chat was relentless. Ethan, we can't even get 10 minutes to ourselves. The kids are climbing the walls. Lauren, this is all your fault. You could have helped. Mom, we just wanted to spend time together. I don't understand why you do this. I read them all without replying. Some were laced with guilt, others with frustration, but every single one confirmed what I already knew. They hadn't invited me for my company. They'd invited me for my labor. Midweek, I got a message from Dad. It was just a photo of the kids building a lopsided sandcastle with the caption, "They miss you." For a second, I felt the smallest tug in my chest. I did miss them, just not enough to trade this freedom for exhaustion. By Thursday, the tone of the messages shifted. The anger dulled into something closer to resignation. Mom, maybe we should have been more upfront. We didn't think you'd take it this way. Ethan, I guess we underestimated you. I almost laughed at that last one. Underestimated? No, they'd just counted on me being the same Madison I'd always been, the one who bent until she broke. On my last full day, I woke early to watch the sunrise from the pier. The horizon went from lavender to gold in a slow, deliberate sweep. I realized I hadn't thought about work once all week, and I'd never once felt the bone-deep fatigue that usually came with family time. I'd hiked trails at Fort Zachary Taylor, taken a sunset sail with a group of strangers who felt like friends by the end of the night, and spent whole afternoons doing absolutely nothing without feeling guilty for it. When I packed my suitcase that evening, the sound of the zipper closing felt different, final, but in a good way. This trip had been more than a getaway. It had been a reminder that I didn't need anyone's permission to value my own time. Tomorrow I'd fly back to Texas, and eventually I'd have to face my family. But for now, standing barefoot on the balcony with the night air brushing against my skin, I let myself enjoy the last few hours of Key West. I wasn't going back the same. The flight back to Austin was quiet, and not just because I kept my earbuds in the whole time. I'd left Key West with a tan, a suitcase full of sandy clothes, and a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. But as the plane descended, I knew that calm was about to be tested. When I landed, I turned my phone on. New messages were already waiting. Mom, we're all coming to see you tomorrow. We need to talk. Ethan, please just open the door when we get there. Lauren, the kids miss you. No apologies, no acknowledgement of what had happened, just expectation. Again. The next afternoon, the doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock. I checked the peephole and saw them, Mom, Dad, Ethan, and Lauren, all without spouses or kids. The air in the hallway seemed heavier for it. I slid the chain into place before opening the door a few inches. "Madison," Mom began, her voice softer than I expected. "We just want to talk." I stayed where I was. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that." "We came all this way," Dad said, his jaw tight. "At least hear us out." "For years," I said, steady but firm. "You've treated my time like it doesn't matter. My plans don't matter. Because I don't have kids, you've assumed I'm free to pick up whatever you drop." "That's not true," Lauren said quickly, though her eyes slid away from mine. "Really?" I held up my phone, screen glowing with the screenshot I'd saved. "Because this says otherwise." It was the text she'd sent to Ethan, the one that blew the whole thing open. They all stared at it in silence. Ethan muttered something under his breath. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. "We have a serious problem with you," Mom said finally, trying to reclaim control. "You should feel guilty for what you did." I actually laughed. "You're the ones who lied to me and you want me to feel guilty? You plotted behind my back and when I made a different choice, suddenly I'm the bad guy?" "You deliberately misled us about your plans," Dad said, his voice rising. "We were worried sick when you didn't show up in San Diego." "I learned from the best," I said evenly. "I played along, just like you all did when you promised I wouldn't be the babysitter this time." "Madison, you're twisting this into something it's not," Ethan said. "No," I replied, my voice sharper now. "I'm describing exactly what it is. You made a plan that depended on me being too polite to say no, and you didn't care if I lost my vacation in the process." They exchanged glances, the kind people share when they realize they've lost the upper hand. "Let us come in," Mom said, her voice taking on that pleading edge. "We can work this out." "Not today," I said. "I need space. And until I believe you actually respect my boundaries, that's how it's going to be." "You're really going to shut out your own family?" Dad asked, incredulous. "What I'm shutting out," I said, "is being taken for granted. If that means less time together, then maybe that's what we need right now." I closed the door slowly but firmly, the chain still in place until the latch clicked. Their muffled voices lingered for a few minutes, then faded down the hallway. I stood there for a while, my hand still on the knob, letting the quiet sink in. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the weight of finally drawing a line and holding it. That evening, I made dinner for myself, nothing fancy, just pasta with garlic and olive oil, and ate it on the couch with the windows open. The silence felt different now, not empty, chosen. For the first time in years, I realized I could decide who got my time and under what terms. And the people who didn't respect that, they could stay on the other side of the door. The next morning after closing the door on my family, the building's hallway felt heavier, as if it remembered what had happened the day before. But my apartment? It was light, quiet in a way I hadn't experienced in years. For the first week, my phone stayed unusually active, missed calls, long texts alternating between guilt trips and half-justifications. "Ethan, you know, Maddie, you could have just said no before we left." Lauren, "I guess we should have asked differently, but we thought you understood." Mom, "I'm still hurt by how you handled this. I read every word and answered none. I didn't block them. I just let the messages sit, unanswered, until the blue dots of read receipts stopped appearing on their end. By week 2, the silence began to settle. No more urgent calls asking me to pick up a niece from school. No last-minute requests to keep the kids overnight. My Sundays no longer came with the automatic assumption I'd be at Mom's table. It was strange at first, like I'd walked out of a room where everyone was still talking and closed the door behind me. But in that quiet, I found space for things I hadn't done in years. I signed up for a weekend pottery class, met Jenna for after-work drinks without watching the clock, took a solo day trip to Fredericksburg, wandering through antique shops and sipping wine at a vineyard until sunset. One Thursday, I came home to find a package at my door, a bouquet of pale yellow roses with a card tucked inside. "Madison, I'm sorry for taking you for granted all these years. No strings attached, just an apology. Ethan. I read it twice before setting the vase on my kitchen table. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. A few days later, the mail brought an envelope with my sister's handwriting. Inside was a letter, the kind people don't send anymore. I didn't realize how selfish I've been. I never thought about how it felt for you. I'm sorry for assuming you'd always be there to pick up where I left off. I'm going to do better. Lauren. It was messy handwriting, crossed out words in the margins, but it felt real. The biggest surprise came from my parents. No lecture, no long guilt-laced voicemail, just a short text from Mom one Sunday morning. We miss you, but we understand you need time. We're here when you're ready. No pressure. No manipulation. The restraint alone was enough to make me set my phone down and stare out the window for a long moment. For the first time, it felt like maybe they were starting to get it. By the third week, the guilt that had been hovering at the edges began to fade. I realized I could think about my family without bracing for the next obligation. And in that space, there was room for something unexpected, curiosity. Were these apologies the beginning of change, or just a temporary truce? I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew this. I wasn't stepping back into the old dynamic. Not ever. If I chose to open the door again, it would be on my terms. That Sunday, I brewed a pot of coffee and sat on my balcony, the city humming faintly in the distance. My phone buzzed once with a photo from Ethan, his kids at the park, all grins and grass stains. No caption, no ask, just the picture. For the first time in weeks, I smiled at a message from him. The quiet I'd carved out for myself had started as a wall, but it was beginning to feel more like a gate, one I could choose to open or not. It was a quiet Thursday evening when I finally replied to Mom's last message. I appreciate your apology. I'm not ready for Sunday dinner yet, but maybe we could meet for coffee this weekend, just you and me. Her response came within seconds. Name the time and place. I'll be there. We picked a small cafe halfway between her neighborhood and mine, a place with floor-to-ceiling windows, warm lighting, and enough space between tables that conversations didn't leak into each other. I got there early, partly out of habit, partly to control the terrain. I chose a corner table, ordered a latte, and tried not to rehearse the conversation in my head. When she walked in, Mom looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in presence. She scanned the room until she spotted me, then crossed over with a tentative smile. "Hi, honey," she said, setting her purse on the chair across from me. "Hi." My voice was calm, but my hands stayed wrapped around the warm ceramic mug like an anchor. The barista brought her coffee, and for a few minutes, we just sipped in silence. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was cautious, like we were both waiting for the other to make the first move. Finally, she set her cup down and met my eyes. "I owe you more than just a text. I have taken advantage of you. For a long time. I see that now." I didn't rush to fill the space. "I'm listening." "When you went to Key West instead of San Diego, I was angry," she admitted. "Not because you weren't with us, but because I knew deep down you were right. We never gave you a choice before. We just assumed you'd help. And when you didn't, it felt like we'd lost something we never had a right to expect." I nodded slowly. "It's not about one trip, Mom. It's about years of being treated like my time was less valuable because I don't have kids. Every emergency babysitting night, every holiday where I ended up doing the work while everyone else relaxed. I let it happen, but that doesn't make it okay." Her hands tightened around her cup. "I know. And I hate that I let it get that far. I should have been the one protecting your time, not taking it from you." We sat with that for a moment. Outside, someone walked by with a dog and a red bandana, and for a brief second, it felt like any other coffee date. "So here's where I'm at," I said finally. "If I come back to Sunday dinners or family vacations, it's on new terms. No unspoken jobs. If you want me to help, you ask first, and no has to be an acceptable answer. Every time." She didn't hesitate. "Agreed." "And it's not just about me saying no," I added. It's about you, Ethan, and Lauren figuring out your own childcare instead of defaulting to me. Hire sitters, trade off between yourselves. Do whatever you have to do, but stop making it my responsibility." Her eyes softened. "We've already started. Ethan and Lauren have been using a sitter since you got back. They even told me they should have done it years ago." That surprised me, but I didn't show it. "Good, because if things go back to how they were, I'll walk away again. And next time, it might be for good." She reached across the table, resting her hand lightly over mine. "We don't want that. I don't want that. I miss you, Maddie, but I respect that you need things to change." I let her hand stay there for a moment before pulling back to take another sip of coffee. "Then we'll see how it goes." By the time we left the cafe, the conversation felt lighter. Not fixed, maybe it never would be fully fixed, but shifted, like the first turn of a key in a lock that had been rusted shut. She hugged me in the parking lot, not the clinging kind she usually gave, but a simple, steady one. 2 months after that coffee with Mom, I found myself parked in front of my parents' house on a Sunday evening. The sun was sliding low, washing the street in amber, and the sound of cicadas droned in the background like a steady drumbeat. I sat there for a moment, engine off, hands on the steering wheel, breathing in slow and deep. I'd agreed to this, yes, but agreeing and being ready were two different things. The front door opened before I reached the porch. Dad stepped out, smiling, not the tight, expectant smile I'd grown used to, but something looser, almost careful. "Hey, kiddo. Good to see you." Inside, the familiar scent of rosemary roast hit me, but this time it didn't feel like bait. The dining table was already set, places arranged without a booster seat shoved in front of mine. Lauren was in the kitchen, slicing bread. She glanced up. "Hey, Maddie." Her tone was soft, without the usual edge of, "What can you do for me?" Ethan was refilling water glasses. His 3 kids were at the far end of the table, coloring quietly. I waited for the inevitable, someone handing me a toddler or a request to just watch them while we finish up. But it didn't come. Instead, Mom walked over and gave me a hug that was firm but not lingering. "We're glad you're here," she said simply, before stepping back to check the oven. At dinner, conversation flowed easily. They talked about work, the kids' school projects, the latest neighborhood drama. No one danced around the San Diego trip. No one teased me about missing out. About halfway through, Mia dropped her fork. It clattered to the floor, and instinctively I leaned to pick it up, but Lauren was already out of her seat. "I've got it," she said with a quick smile. Ethan even leaned over at one point and asked, "Do you mind passing the salad?" The way he said it, asking instead of assuming, was a small thing, but it landed heavier than he probably knew. After dessert, the kids were shooed off to the living room to watch a movie. I stayed at the table, swirling the last of my coffee, listening to the low murmur of my parents talking about their garden. For once, I didn't feel like I had to perform. I wasn't there to fill a role. I was just there. When it was time to leave, Mom walked me to the door. "Thanks for coming," she said. Her eyes held mine for a moment, and I saw it, the recognition that this was different now, that I was different now. Driving home, I replayed the evening in my head. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was progress, and progress was enough for now. In the quiet of my apartment later, I thought about the past few months, the slammed doors, the silence, the first awkward coffee, and now this dinner that didn't feel like a transaction. I'd learned that setting boundaries isn't a one-time act. It's a muscle you build, a language you teach the people around you. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't, but you have to speak it anyway. I'd learned that love without respect will drain you dry, and respect without boundaries will never last. Most of all, I'd learned that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. And when you start valuing your own time, the people who truly value you will adjust. So here I am, still Madison Clark, still a daughter, sister, and aunt, but no longer the default babysitter, the last-minute stand-in, or the family safety net they can pull without asking. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever felt like the person everyone relies on until you have nothing left for yourself, remember this: you are allowed to step back. You are allowed to take up space in your own life. And you are allowed to teach people how to treat you, even if it means walking away until they learn. If you found something in my story that spoke to you, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, when was the last time you truly chose yourself?